Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So I ran into on social media two fascinating young ladies from Halifax who have got a podcast called Rival and Queen podcast. And it sounds kind of fascinating. They're based in Halifax. They met while working together on a startup that Ashley co-founded called, is it Harbor?
Yes. Yeah.
And they both have startup tech and entrepreneur roots, which makes them working together, they say, a breeze at times. A year and a half later, they became workout buddies, best friends, and basically attached to the hip. And then Rival and Queen was born. They launched this podcast, which is really quite interesting. And we're going to go through some of the guests that they've had because they really are some fascinating individuals, because I wanted to get to know the amazing people who are around them in Halifax, creators, entrepreneurs, athletes, and artists. And their inspiration was to talk to people that they wanted to have as friends. I think that's a great attitude. And they wanted to learn about what they were creating, different, unique life paths. And I love this, what lights them up. What a great description of why you wanted to do a podcast. And I got to tell you, so I started my radio show in September of 2019 during the federal election campaign. It was primarily at that time just a political campaign, but then particularly once the pandemic started the following winter, I'm a reasonably sociable person, and I found that I wasn't socializing nearly as much with brand new people. And I found that my radio show and podcasts gave me exactly that opportunity to meet fascinating people like you that light up the world. And so Ashley and Sarah, Rival and Queen, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, we're doing well. Thanks for having us.
So tell me why you decided, after becoming workout buddies and entrepreneurs that had some in common, to all of a sudden do a podcast. That's a big move and commitment, is it not?
It is. It is a big commitment, but I think with anything we've learned in starting businesses, it's always great to be naive because you don't know how much work it's going to take. And I think that's the great thing about starting new projects. So we didn't know how much work it was going to be, but I think for us, in our work, it was very tactical. We had plans, really kind of goals we were working for. We wanted a creative outlet that let us kind of try new things out and really be our full selves and be able to lean into our creativity. And so that's what the podcast gave us.
Lean into your creativity. What do you mean by that?
I think just play around, being able to be relaxed with people and ask them different questions, be a little bit more unbuttoned, not as professional all the time.
And with less stress or structure. I mean, we do structure things now. We've got everything very systematically done, but being able to say, we want to learn about this or talk to this person, or we want to spin up this event to help the community. It's just kind of whatever comes to us. And we're usually pretty aligned, which is really fun. And then we're able to just go one route and the next week go another route. So there's no limits, I guess, to what we do, which is fun.
There doesn't have to primarily be people in Halifax or the East Coast or what?
We've had guests as far as Australia and, throughout Canada, throughout the US, but certainly we do focus a lot on Halifax. And I think we've seen that really help our community grow. And it's expanded to New Brunswick and the rest of the Atlantic provinces as well.
Awesome. Well, our radio station is based in the west side of Toronto, but we have a signal that crosses most of the Greater Toronto area. If people want to tune in to your podcast and check the two of you out, how do they do that?
They can listen anywhere on all podcast platforms. We're on YouTube, so we stream our videos there, and you can find all those links at our website, which is rivalandqueen.com.
Now, why Rival and Queen?
We get asked this question so much. I'll tell the story. Years ago, I had kind of a vision or an idea to maybe start a clothing store, some type of, store, brick and mortar vision. And I had the name Rival and Queen. I just thought it kind of was edgy and loved how it sounded. And when Sarah and I were throwing around different podcast names, I just had brought it up one day and she was like, I love it. The .com was available. All the social handles were available. So we kind of make, with our backgrounds as well, we make decisions really quickly and we want to move on to the next step. So it's let's get the name, cross that off. Let's get a logo, cross that off so we can actually get to the good of making the podcast. So
I was trying to figure out which one of you was rival and which one was queen.
everyone asks that.
I always say Ashley's the queen, but actually it's
So you're the
now.
rival.
I'm the rival. Yeah. By default. I think that's pretty accurate anyways.
What a great name that you've got, and we've got a list of some of the people that you've interviewed, and we're gonna chat about some of them after the break, if we could. Dr. Meredith Ralston on the unfinished sexual revolution, Jonathan Torrens and Sylvia Burns on the Canadian Content Studio on creating media that matters. Peace by Chocolate founder Tariq Haddad, a Syrian refugee who built an incredible chocolate business in just a few years. Quake Matthews, a hip hop artist. Natasha Gohl, she started the Cure Skincare. Fascinating group of individuals that you've had on your podcast. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more in just a minute with Sarah and Ashley, who are Rival and Queen, a podcast that comes to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Stay with us, everybody. 2 minutes away. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm very excited to introduce you tonight to Ashley and Sarah, who have a podcast out of Halifax, Nova Scotia called Rival and Queen. And I got to tell you, when I first found you guys, it was because someone who I think is a little bit controversial, I interviewed about a year ago, and you interviewed very recently, someone by the name of Dr. Meredith Ralston, who is a professor really studying sexual revolution, women's rights, and slut shaming, which I found kind of interesting. And I interviewed her, and then you interviewed her, and she spoke extremely highly of the interview that she had with you. And so that's how I think I came across you guys and checked out some of your podcasts and really enjoyed them. And so thank you for being open to meeting me today. You've been doing this podcast for how long?
We actually started September 2019 as well. So same time as you.
Awesome. And how often do you do it?
We record sometimes a few times a week, but we release one episode a week every Thursday. So we've been very consistent, which is the key, I think, to success in many different forms. But we release an episode every Thursday.
And we're at episode 121.
Excellent. Fantastic. And we talked earlier that this started out in Halifax, but you've now broadened for across the world.
Yeah, we love to focus here locally to get to know people doing exciting things or opening new businesses, but there are obviously a lot of interesting people on unique paths elsewhere. So right now we're really focusing, kind of expanding that throughout Ontario or different places in the US to help build more awareness around what we're doing.
Well, you got to check out my brother and his partner have an art studio called 12 Acre Hill, which is just outside of Halifax on the way to Peggy's Cove. So you're going to have them on and interview them.
Oh, amazing.
And show their great art studio, which is fantastic, has a beautiful view of the ocean. Why did you want to start this podcast? It says you wanted to, you told me that you wanted to meet interesting people, but lots of people want to meet interesting people and they don't start podcasts.
I think we naturally we're both entrepreneurs, so we both lean that way, but it did start. I had an idea for a podcast a few years before, because when I joined Harbor, Ashley's company that she co-founded, I had moved from Newfoundland. And so I had an idea to start a podcast with one of my friends there to keep in touch with him, but that never came about. And Ashley knew about it.
And I was like, let me in. I want to be in the podcast.
And then one night, actually, it's kind of a funny story. Right after the Raptors won the NBA finals, they were down in Halifax, a few of them. We were out one night. The Spittin' Chicklets, who also have a podcast that's very famous around hockey, were in town, and we happened to be out with all of them somehow. And as we were there, we were inspired by them, but we were also like looking at each other across the bar and like, if they can do it, we can do it.
So tell me about Harper. What's Harper?
So that's as Sarah mentioned, a startup that I've co-founded. So we focus in the construction space, anything from tracking progress to payments. So it's more of like a fintech financial early payment platform for construction. I know you work in construction too, so it's so interesting.
Not construction, but in development, but we hire contractors and construction people. And so how did you get involved in construction and fintech payments and early payments?
So it's kind of a funny story. My background is in interior decorating and design. So that's what I did right out of after completing that program. My father-in-law is a real estate developer here throughout Nova Scotia. So they had hired me to fill a different role that they needed filled there at the time. Which I wasn't as excited about, but really good reflecting back now, because I kind of got to be the office manager and see all the different moving parts and still do a lot of the design on the new construction side of things. And then I got a random email one day from a gal who introduced me to another girl that I didn't really know, someone from university. And they said, this person's looking to hire someone to do a little home renovation. So I went and met Dave and Kara Kim, and Dave had came from a tech background, had a successful acquisition with Salesforce, and we became really good friends throughout this project. Kara's from Cape Breton, just like the most sweet, lovable, down to earth person, and Dave being a tech like minded person, very systematic. When this happens, and he couldn't understand how the delays and like the miscommunications and all these things were happening just on these small home projects that they were doing. So we decided to just start digging in and talking to people in the industry to figure out like what some of the core problems were. And then he became one of my co-founders. So we started Harbor that way. And that was 6 years ago. So we really evolved, as Sarah knows. You kind of like try and pivot and try and like live in that sweet spot of what you think can be successful.
Fantastic. What are the keys to being a successful entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I feel like just not stopping is one of them. Like just really staying laser focused on kind of what your end vision or goal is. And like, it'd be so easy to give up. And I think it's hard, and you definitely want to, but I think you just have to keep going and trying. What do you think, Sarah?
Not stopping is definitely a good one. Consistency, I think, goes in hand with that as well.
But you mentioned pivot a couple of times. So not stopping doesn't mean hitting your head against a brick wall. It means what? Just not stopping, but being prepared to pivot when you need to pivot.
Yeah, having the like understanding why you pivot. You don't just wake up and do it, and not being married or stuck on one idea or something that you spent so much time creating.
Yeah.
And then, it's not working, and, the industry isn't liking this or whatever's happening. And then you need to kind of like step back and figure out how to reposition yourself. I think that's hard for people because they're so stuck on that original thing. So you just have to be very willing to try something and hope that it works.
It's interesting that you made consistent. What's the word? It's cinnamon, married and stuck. No comment.
Yeah. No comment.
No comment.
Okay, so this podcast you've done for 2.5 years, once a week. It's a big commitment. Why is it so important to you?
I think just the network we've built and the community we built has been incredible. And anyone with a strong network, like, just the benefits of that, of getting to know incredible people. We're both very people oriented. So those relationships really matter. And I think, much like you said, during the pandemic, that was an incredible gift for us for every week to be able to connect with people one-on-one. And podcasting gives us a way to really kind of go deep. And because it's our own thing, because we get to focus on what we want, we get to have really meaningful conversations with people about, some incredible life changes. We recently had someone on, a business owner, who talked about when she was 23 years old, going through divorce, like while expanding her business. We've also had, you mentioned Quake Matthews. He's an up and coming hip hop artist, but we get to see the inside of what his journey's like, the highs and the lows. And so it's just it's something we both naturally enjoy, getting to know people on this level, but it also, the community that's built around us has been incredible.
What do you mean community?
We have a fantastic group of listeners and followers and supporters that really engage. We hold live events, and it's just amazing to see the people that come out to that, but also just other businesses that we're able to support and help their businesses grow.
Yeah, it's nice to give people that little platform to even come on and tell their story or share what they're working on. And you in that hour that we sit down or virtually record, you develop this bond. It's so interesting. We know if we go to LA or we go to Australia, as Sarah mentioned, that we talk to someone like we could just reach out to that person and say, hey, do you want to grab a coffee? Do you want to grab a drink? You just have that connection. And every week when we put out another episode, that connection just keeps building and building in that network, which we consider a community.
You said you had live events. What kind of live events do you have?
Oh, very fun one. So we've done many wine tastings live, like most of them have been virtual. Actually, we did them through the pandemic, which have been huge hits, sold out every time. We've done golf tournaments, which are a lot of fun.
Charity golf tournament. Yeah.
And then we do a few charity events throughout the year. So we do food drives and things like that. And it's just amazing to see the people that come out. And we're really looking forward to having a very large party this summer, hopefully.
A large party. Well, make sure you invite me. I want to come.
We will.
I love that.
So tell me about Dr. Meredith Ralston and your interview with her on the unfinished sexual revolution.
That was a very interesting one. As you said, a little bit controversial, and it really opened our eyes and made us reflect kind of on our experiences as teens and going to university. And she's just such an incredible voice for women.
Yeah. And it actually came out perfectly timed for us around Women's Day, International Women's Day last week. And so it was, I think, as Ashley said, she makes the topic really approachable. And as women, we all have these moments that we can reflect on where we've either been like pressured or been in an uncomfortable situation or just not had that kind of equality, maybe when it comes to sexual interests or even this idea of the pleasure gap. So these are all kind of new concepts that her talking about them to us, I felt like we learned so much about even our own behavior as women.
But explain, if you could, what the pleasure gap is, and do you agree that there is such a thing?
So the pleasure gap essentially is that for women, especially, everything around sex, I hope this is right. It's very biological focused. So it's about like biologically having babies or like reproducing, but it's never about actually being able to enjoy sex and how to enjoy your body and exploring kind of the pleasurable side of sexuality. And I think one of the concepts that came up as well is this idea for women that we're always taught to self-police ourselves when it comes to sexual desire and how we behave in the world with others.
I had an interesting chat with her, and I got the impression, I guess she had said that initially she was really against the idea of prostitution and sex workers and things like that. And she ended up doing a film with numerous different sex workers, and then did her study and questionnaire and wrote the book, and came to the conclusion that actually sex workers was a positive in society. What did you think of that argument?
It was an interesting way to kind of step back and look at that, because it's so taboo. And I mean, it's illegal, right? For that, not for them, but it's for like,
for
you
someone
can't
to
buy.
solicit.
Yeah. So it was really interesting to flip the script that way and think like, oh, these women, some of them, I mean, there's certainly like dark, like sides of this too, but that they actually enjoyed it. It's something that they wanted to do and pursue as work. So it's kind of hard. I think it's really depends on the situation and the person.
I think for me, like the fact that she went into this, I love when you go into things with a bias, and she went in thinking this is wrong, and then your mind is changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's incredibly powerful. And just knowing her as the expert she is and kind of the research she would have done around that, I think the fact that she looked at this not wanting to think it was an empowering industry, and then ending up at the conclusion, despite wanting to, that there is kind of good and it should be legalized. Mm-hmm. I think that's just like an impactful takeaway.
I was surprised that you used the word empower and that she used the word empower. And she talked about how many of the sex workers she met. And I guess she did a survey and found out that a substantial amount of the sex workers were students, were entrepreneurs, were people that were trying to start businesses. And they really were empowered by the ability to make some money that allowed them to get going. And I guess that's completely different than the perception I think a lot of people had of sex workers as being forced into the situation, and not empowered, but being a victim. And she was suggesting most of them aren't victims. They're actually doing it to make money and frankly take advantage of the fact that there's this pleasure gap, and men were in need of or desirous of their time and attention, and we're using it to get a better new start on life. What did you think of that?
I mean, I remember, so I I don't think that's anything new. I remember very vividly when I was in university 10 years ago now, there was a friend of mine from Montreal, and one of his best friends essentially was involved in not sex work, but was basically like a dominatrix in a nightclub. But she did that 2 nights a week because she made in those 2 nights like $2,000 or $3,000. And that allowed her to pay for her. She was doing a PhD at the time, but essentially she was enabling herself to get ahead in her career in a way that she was comfortable with. So I think that's a different context, but I don't think this is necessarily something new. And if you are comfortable with that and you have a vision and that works for you, then like power to you, honestly.
Yeah. And it's something you sign up for.
Yeah.
I think that's like the big thing. It's something you're pursuing and want to do.
And I guess one of the conclusions that she comes to through the whole analysis is that there's this idea of slut shaming. And she talked about it being a problem, both from a male standpoint as a way of men dominating females and keeping the ones that want to make use of their erotic capital, their sexiness, and keep them sort of back and down. But she also suggested it was a lot of females that slut shamed, that made derogatory comments to females that use their sexuality or their attractiveness or their figures or whatever to get ahead, and that they made it inappropriate for them to do so. What do you think of that? Is that something that's still prevalent? And she said it's an unfinished sexual revolution because of that. Do you agree?
I don't see it as much now. I'm almost 35, but definitely I can recall in high school, university, either hearing chatter about other people or just the judgment that goes with, a lady being like free and wanting to sleep with more people. I think that's one thing we've really, we're so much harder on women that way. The judgment is really unfair because of course men can kind of be a little more liberal and free and open about how many partners they might be pursuing or that they've been with. And then women, it just seems like a little more judgmental and black cloud around like that person.
It still exists.
Yeah.
Is the simple answer.
So number of partners is a bragging point for men and it's a negative for females. Is that still correct?
Generally, I would say. Yeah.
Well, that's a fascinating person that you interviewed. And then you interviewed 2 people, Jonathan Torrens and Sylvia Burns of the Canadian Content Studio on creating media that matters. What is media that matters?
Well, I think we grew up with Jonathan Torrens and as like Street Sense and John O'Vision. He was like, for us growing up, the height before the internet, the height of like teen pop culture in Canada.
Definitely.
And I think as such an experience, like he's built his career in media and became kind of disenfranchised with how you could have this project you really cared about. You pitch it to media to network execs. Someone edits it again. 2 years later, it's passed through all these different levels and then gets killed at the final stage before it goes into production. And I think he found that really frustrating. And then kind of wanted to rebel against that and wanted to make the projects that he actually wanted to bring to life. And so we partnered up with Sylvia and they started making content that mattered to them. And at this time, it's really kind of showing different people. So they have a show that just launched on CBC, and I can't remember, Who Do You Think I Am? Yes. And it's hosted by a young lady named Maddie who has Down syndrome. And she interviews different guests about kind of the stereotypes they might have about each other, really to break down those kind of barriers. And so for them, it's about creating content that actually makes them feel good, that makes them feel proud, and making sure it comes to life.
And what's their argument that commercial television and media don't allow us to create content that matters?
Not that it doesn't allow, that it might get killed along the way, that it could take 5. So I used to work in television years ago, and it's crazy to think the way you sell a TV show is you take like a 1-page document, you give it to a network exec, sell them on the vision, they take it back to sell to their network partners, and it gets passed through all these hands. And at the end of the day, someone could get fired, someone could leave the company, and your project could die on the vine, like as they go, or at the last minute, a company cuts a budget for a project. And so I think just the timeline to create media is so long that it's really easy for it to lose its initial essence or the initial idea along the way. And it may never even make it to light. And so they just wanted more control over making sure the things they wanted came to fruition.
And so, a big part for them, I was just going to add that a big part for them was also like creating a really good work environment for all their employees. Like they've obviously seen different aspects of the industry that they didn't really love. So they really treat everyone like with, equal equity and just like equal opportunity for everyone that works on their set too, which is really important. And you can just tell that they're lovely humans to work for. So I feel like that in itself, it's so important. Yeah. Cause it can be tough in any industry to kind of have that, sense of like good work relationships.
Lovely humans to work for. That'd be a nice thing to have people describe you as. It's interesting when you talk about media, and you guys are in it now. And there's been a lot of controversy of late because of right-wing extremism or left-wing extremism, or people living in echo chambers, or the impact of Facebook and Instagram and TikTok on people. And some people would argue that the plethora of different social media and media outlets and YouTube, et cetera, is a negative because everyone gets fragmented and they live in their own little echo chambers. And there was the show on TV, I think it was called Network or something like that, I can't remember, that argued that, a generation ago, everyone listened to one of 3 news shows and got the same objective news. And so I guess my question would be to you, is it better if we all listen to the same CBC, CNN, Fox News? I guess it wasn't then. Then it was CBC, CTV, ABC, CBS, NBC, et cetera. And our access to information was limited. It was objective. I guess they thought it was. And everyone listened to the same thing. Or is it better today when there's this plethora of media choices and you can get your news from almost anyone you want to get it from?
Double-edged sword, I feel like.
I don't think that's an easy question to answer. I do think it's better to have a variety of sources and a variety of viewpoints shared. Like, I think that is important. And I think in the world, we're seeing that now. Diversity of thought is incredibly important. It allows us to advance faster, I believe. It does make for probably more uncomfortable conversations, but those are important conversations to have. Mm-hmm. And I think it allows people who don't normally get to maybe have a platform, actually create a platform. And that part is really meaningful.
Yeah, I agree. It can be difficult because then you're getting so many different funnels of different misinformation or different pieces of information. But I think as long as if you're having tough conversations, it would be nice to have kind of that rainbow aspect of different thoughts and opinions. Like, this is why someone's thinking or sharing information this way, and kind of understand, even if you don't stand for that, or kind of where your views lie, it's nice to understand, well, someone has this opinion or view because, and kind of being able to be open-minded, I think, is really important, which a lot of people right now are only focused on their opinions.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is anytime I believe really strongly in something, or I'm really holding to an idea, I'm like, I have to go, I make myself go and kind of seek out information on the opposite side. Cause I think nothing's as black as white as we feel. And there's a lot of places where we can build common ground with others. And I think it's good for us to kind of reflect, push ourselves, but then also think critically about what we're consuming.
Yeah. And that's tonight with Ashley and Sarah, who have got a podcast out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, called rivalandqueen.com or at rivalandqueen on Instagram and TikTok. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Sarah and Ashley in just a minute. 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with 2 East Coast gals based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, that first met when they were involved in a startup that Ashley co-founded called Harbor, which is construction pricing or payments or fintech or something like that. I'm going to have to check it out at some point in time. We'll do a separate interview on that. Sounds kind of interesting. But they became workout buddies and best friends. And then basically when they became attached at the hip, they decided to launch a podcast called Rival and Queen. They've actually interviewed some fascinating people. And because of that, they said that they've become friends with them and created a community and wanted to understand what those individuals were creating, what their unique life paths were. And I love this, what lights them up. What lights them up. I think it's fantastic to find out what people's passions are, what gives them zest, what lights them up. And so if you're able to do that in your podcast, fantastic. And in two, I've only listened to two, I apologize, but I've listened to two. You did light those people up, and you were wonderful in getting them to chat about what they were passionate about and what their message to the world was. And so congratulations for you in that regard. Let me ask you, what's it like building a business with a best friend? Like, that's got to be a little bit different. Is it good or is it bad? Because like, you can't fire your best friend.
You're right. Well, it's really funny because we did meet at work. When Sarah walked through the door the first time at Harbor, it took us a little while. Like, we weren't instantly best friends, but I think that's right. But I think that's the difference is we weren't friends before.
Yeah.
We started out as a working relationship. There was just like a different form of like that respect and how we like respected each other and how we
knew how to
work together.
Yeah. We knew how to work together as a foundation. So that made it way easier.
I agree. Yeah. Just way easier to have, sit down and like that meeting kind of structure. Even as friends, we have meetings all the time for the podcast and go through ideas. And it's just like, we both have very different things that we are good at, which also makes us successful. I think we know how to divide and conquer. I think if too many like-minded people, I mean, this is why diversity is very important in businesses and in your friendship groups, because if everyone has the same opinion or the same thought, you can really not mesh well together.
We have very different abilities and we know each other's abilities, which I think is good. And as a very clean example, if you ever look at her Instagram, I have not posted one photo on there because that visually, Ashley is very good at those things. And that is not a skill set of mine. I'll make a bunch of random videos, but
or do the editing.
Do editing.
The editing queen. But I think, that was really why it does work and continue to work, because we kind of had that coming together through work, and our friendship's never been stronger, which is good.
What surprised you about the podcast? Anything?
I think just like actually how closely we connected with our guests. Like, we've become really, really good friends with some of the people we met through it. And to be honest, it was such a nice way for me, as I had just moved to Halifax, like back to Halifax the year before, to reconnect with people in the city and reconnect with people who we wanted to be friends with. Like, very genuinely, they were other entrepreneurs creating really interesting lives and creating kind of taking charge of how they wanted their life to look. And that is so appealing. So
you guys have both mentioned this a few times, community and network. Why is building a network so important to the two of you?
We just naturally love talking to people. And it's so fun now that we have this podcast and we worked with amazing brands and companies throughout Nova Scotia, that like, you just know these people, you know what I mean? You might've seen them from afar, someone you kind of admired or seen on social media. Now you have this friendship and connection, and we're able to help them do something. They're able to help us. Like, there's just this like back and forth, this relationship. And I think that really lights us up, Brian. It makes us excited.
That is so true. I think we're both creators, and I like very much at the core, I think we both believe in creating a life that really excites us and lights us up, and having the ability to do that. And so being able to connect with others in a meaningful way who are doing the same thing is awesome. Because literally we get in the room with some of these people and we're like, let's do a collaboration. Like, we want to launch a jewelry line with one of our friends, or we want to have like our own wine. And we're working on these things with people who are our friends now and who have the ability to help us do that. So it's kind of, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What's next for Rival and Queen?
Like Sarah mentioned, hopefully some in-person events, and we've got a lot of fun brands. We love working with genuine, like, people we love and the brand. So we won't just plug something on social media because someone's saying, oh, we would like to pay you to do this. We really value things that we like. So it's really fun. We've got some fun collaborations coming up this summer. We're doing another charity golf tournament in July in support of Add Some House for Women and Children here in Halifax.
We want to go on a live tour this summer too. That's the other thing we're really excited for. It's always so fun to go to new cities. And like we said, we have so much respect for entrepreneurs and creators. And it's just like a great way to get to know other people who are putting things out into the world.
So you said you wanted to highlight some different entrepreneurial businesses and put a spotlight on businesses and brands that you love. are you then sort of like an advertorial?
None of our content, like for our guests, are paid or anything like that. So that is not an advertorial. It is like if we genuinely love what someone's creating and we believe in it and we love them, then we just want to give them a platform to share their story with the world. It's very organic, but I think it's also very genuine and authentic. Anything we're sharing with the community, it's because we believe in it and we love it.
What are the lessons learned of launching your podcast?
Well, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And as we grow, we eventually want to, bring on someone to kind of help us with content creation. Though we love it, it can be time consuming while we both manage our full-time jobs. So I think that a lot of growth, I think, is coming in the next few months.
Here are my 2 favorite lessons. 1, hire a producer out of the gate.
Yeah.
So important, because it takes so much time, and set the standard to have a high quality. We did that right from the gate, which was good, but I was originally editing it. It takes way too much time. Hire a good producer. The second one, always have extra episodes in the bank, because stuff happens.
Yes.
It's great to be able to, we believe in consistency. We've brought that up a few times on the show, but it's great to be able to have an extra episode that if something happens, you're not leaving your listeners hanging. And I think the other thing, very importantly, is to be authentic and be yourself. And that's what's helped us have success, is that we are honest with our guests, with our listeners. And the more we share with them about our personal lives, I think the more they really connect with us.
Yeah, I agree. Well put.
It's interesting because, in my own personal experience with my own radio show, and I also produce podcasts out of the radio show. It's interesting that it's when I talk with my own little rant, either at the beginning of the show or at the end of the show, it's what people comment about the most, and they want to hear what my interviewees have to say. There's no question, but then they want to hear what I've got to say, and the radio station really likes that. They want to have the radio host that has a point of view, has an opinion. And as you say, is authentic. And people believe that what I say really comes from myself. I'm not saying it because someone paid me to say it or because I was influenced to say it, but because that's what I believe. And so I think that authenticity is so critically important. You also talked about, again, power of community. And I want to come back to this if I could, because I think that, one of the things that we've heard a lot about in the last couple of months is this rallying cry of freedom in the trucker convoy and stuff like that. But Canada has been more, I think, about community. Tell me about power of community and what that means to you.
For us, we've been blown away by our community, and especially through the pandemic, I think we saw people really step up and wanting to help their neighbors, for lack of a better expression. And so during the first holidays during the pandemic, we saw people wanting to help each other out, but not having a way to do that. So we actually came up with a food drive where Ashley and I drove around everywhere in Halifax and would do a safe pickup. So people could just put food on their doorstep
for 5 hours.
I think it was 7 hours that we drove around the whole city, and we were able to collect more than 5,000 meals for families. And then this year we got almost 10,000 meals together for families. And I think that just shows you the power of community and how you're able to help other people out. And we are honestly just lucky that we had a way to kind of help bring people together. But I think that's a really succinct example of I think
it's, to remember why community exists, why it's important, and have little, examples like that or other events, just to remember that we're all human, we're neighbors, we're here to help each other, and just focus on that. I know there's a lot of, negativity and turmoil out there. And it's just, I think we need to focus more on why we're more alike and similar than why we're so different, which can be challenging.
If people want to check you out and follow you, how best to do that? Is it to check out one of your podcasts or follow you on Instagram or what? And
You
tell
can
us
do
what the handle is.
both. Yeah. So it's at Rival and Queen on all social media platforms, and then rivalandqueen.com. All the links are on our website to go and listen, or on all the podcast platforms. You can just look up Rival and Queen.
You get a little more of our personalities on social media.
Yeah. You don't just hear our voices. You get the whole bit.
We're chatting tonight with Ashley and Sarah. They've launched a podcast out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, called rivalandqueen.com, and is spelt out. So it's RAVALANDQUEEN.com. They're also on Instagram and TikTok at Rival and Queen. Ladies, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'm going to take a final break, and we're going to come back for our concluding session. And I'm going to try to turn the tables. And I'm going to see if Ashley and Sarah will invite me on to the Rival and Queen podcast and ask them if they want to interview me. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Stay with us, everybody. We're going to take a break, and we're going to introduce you to the Rival and Queen podcast in just a few minutes. Stay with us, everybody.
What's up, everyone? You are listening to the Rival and Queen podcast. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Sarah, and we're so happy to be here.
Thanks for tuning in.
Today, we've got a very special guest with us, Brian Crombie. Welcome.
All the way
Thank
from
you.
Toronto.
All the way from Toronto.
We're doing a little back and forth here on Brian's show, but we're testing him out for the Rival and Queen podcast.
Yeah, very important audition, Brian.
How am I doing so far?
Well, we haven't let you talk. So, I mean, it's not really your fault that you're not ahead yet.
Okay.
But Brian, we're going to start off in the reverse order. This is like the testing question to see if you're going to make the cut.
Okay.
We want to know what lights you up, what you're excited about in your life.
Well, I think meeting people like you. And so we talked earlier about meeting the professor that you interviewed. And I thought that, she had a very controversial, at least I thought, controversial thesis about slut shaming. And I really enjoyed meeting her. And she was authentic. But then the two of you are incredibly authentic. And I think that that's fascinating. I've interviewed, I think, close to 1,000 people so far. And it's really been absolutely fascinating. I've similar to you, I've met people from across the world. Last week, I interviewed someone from downtown Kiev, and he was okay in southwestern Kiev, but his friends and co-workers that were in north Kiev were under attack. I've interviewed a bunch of Ukrainian Canadians and talked about what their problems and challenges were as they were talking to their family members back in Ukraine. And you think about living through that kind of experience. It's been fascinating. Last week, I spoke to two different individuals that are professors and academics studying military preparedness, Canadian military preparedness. And, they argued that we're bottom line not prepared. So I get to meet regular people. I get to meet professors. I get to meet academics. I get to meet lots of politicians, and I get to meet some hip hop artists as well. I interviewed a gentleman that is a Rastafarian, very popular, and had a park named after him because of the work he was doing in bringing that community into the mainstream. And so it's kind of fun, isn't it?
And it's such a good way, as you're saying that, and that's kind of part of our foundation, is just that way to learn by having conversations and sitting down. You might have one perspective about, like you mentioned, Meredith and kind of what she's working on. But then as soon as you actually have these conversations, you learn so much. And I think even when I consume podcasts outside of our own, like I learned so many things just by not saying anything and just listening, I think is very powerful.
That's a very good lesson.
What can I say?
I think too, Brian, one of the things that you're doing that's so cool is you talk to such a wide variety of people, but you also get into kind of really hot topics. Like we're not as much into that, but what are some of the more controversial things you've discovered or like talked about?
So I had a gentleman on last week who's one of the organizers of Conservatives for Clean Growth. And I said off the top, isn't that an oxymoron? And so it's interesting that there is a group within the Conservative Party trying to influence the leadership campaign that's going on within the federal Conservative Party today to make sure they argue that the leader the new prospective leader has a good climate change policy, because this group argues that the Conservative Party at times have had climate change deniers and people that haven't been authentic and realistic in regards to what needs to happen in climate change, which, I happen to believe that climate change is one of the most important issues of our time. And a lot of people in polls would say the same thing. And so that if you have a leader that appeals to the ultra right within the Conservative Party, and so therefore is a climate change denier, this group's argument is they'll never have electoral success. And so they want to influence it. That was a really interesting, discussion. I've got two people that I'm interviewing tomorrow morning that'll broadcast sometime this week. One person that's a spokesman for Pierre Poilievre, the front runner within the Conservative leadership debate, and someone else that is a spokesperson for Jean Charest, the former premier of Quebec and the former leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, who's now re-entering politics after a decade out and trying to be Captain Canada all over again. So, that's kind of fun. And then last night, I interviewed and broadcast a coach that just talks about empowerment. So I go from politics to military to music to coaches.
I love that.
And talking to podcasters like us.
Okay, the one other question we're going to have to ask you, Brian, that we ask all of our guests on the Rival and Queen podcast. We have this game. It's made up. It's called Queeniegrams. It's very easy to play. And all you have to do is pick a number between 1 and 146. And we're going to ask you a question. We'll all answer it, but you 33. Have to pick. What number?
33.
33. I feel like someone picked this number the other day. All right. What is one song that makes you drop it low?
Drop it low?
Yeah, drop it low.
Or gets you excited. Like, yeah.
You start dancing.
So you will hear it when you hear your show being broadcast, because it's my intro song. It's called September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. And
love that song.
I'm a little bit older than the two of you, not much, but a little bit older than the two of you. And I got to tell you that when I had to go to write an exam in university, I would put at the top of the volume September, Earth, Wind, and Fire on, and it would get me hyped up and ready to go. And it was wonderful. And then I had this real problem because I then heard this song. I went to, I think it was the Pan Am Games. It was the closing ceremony for the Pan Am Games. And this guy came on and he sang a song that was almost as good as September. And it was, and I got it wrong. And my daughter laughed incessantly because I got it wrong, because it was Fireball by Pitbull and I best
Fireball.
But Fireball was such a great inspirational song as well. So I think those are the two. If I could give you one more, it would be I think it's called La Vida Loco by Coldplay.
Ricky Martin.
Oh, those are good choices, Brian.
Brian, to say I'm very impressed by the breadth of your song choices right now.
Okay. My best song before I go to bed is Up on the Roof by the Nylons, because whenever you get hassled and you need to get away, you go up on the roof where there's room enough for two, and you stare at the stars and you get quiet. So I've got a small balcony off of my bedroom. And not now because it's pretty cold, but a lot of the times I'll go up on the balcony, if not the roof, and quiet down and meditate for a couple minutes and thank the world for being a wonderful world.
Oh, that's so nice. I love these different songs that you have too. I think they all speak to nice times in our lives. Also, though, September is one of my favorite songs.
It's such a great song. It reminds me of golf. We golf a lot, and I feel like that is one of the songs we constantly have on for whatever reason. Do we have time for one more, Brian?
Go for it.
All right. You pick one more number.
This is how we really get to know our guest on like
100.
a different level.
100.
Ooh.
All right. Let's see what we got here. Have you ever had a DIY fail?
No.
Do it yourself.
No.
Ooh.
I feel like
DIY. Sorry, I thought you said a DUI.
A DUI. No, a DIY. Do it yourself fail.
Oh yeah, lots. So I am not handy. And so it's a challenge. And so, one of the keys to success is having the guy, someone who will come out. And I actually had lunch yesterday with my car mechanic, who has been taking care of my cars for 22 years. And if you don't have a really good car mechanic in today's society that you can trust and won't overcharge you and will take care of your cars, and you need someone like that for the house. So there's no question. I've had lots of DIY fails because I am not a handy kind of guy. Ladies, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. I hope that I can feel like I'm part of your community, because I certainly feel like you're part of my community. And I look forward to be invited to the party in Halifax this summer. We have been chatting with Ashley and Sarah, who have a podcast that I encourage you to check out called Rival and Queen. That's our show for tonight. Ashley and Sarah, thanks for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Halifax, at www.saga960am.ca. All of my podcasts and videocasts are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the podcasts are on Apple, Audible, and Speakeasy Podcast. Ladies, you're fantastic. Good luck with your podcast. Good night, everybody.